A mid-tier CPU and a literal Halo-tier GPU? I must be mad. Well, actually, not quite as mad as you might think. AMD's Ryzen 7600X is a decent hex-core chip that you'd find in a number of mid-range systems. A normal GPU to pair with this would be something like a 60 or 70 class card, like a 3060 or 3070, maybe even a TI variant, or something like a 700 series AMD card like the 6700 XT. But what if I told you that even a 4090, well, it works perfectly fine? Well, let me prove my point. Now, AMD sent over both a 7600X and a 7900X, and NVIDIA sent over a brand new Founders Edition RTX 4090. So let's test both of these CPUs with the 4090 and see how much performance you lose by using literally half the cores. Now, I'm testing at both 1440p and 4K here with ray tracing disabled and at generally high settings. I mean, it's a 4090, so why not? The exception to the high settings rule though is of course CSGO, which is on everything set to low, and at 1440p, the 7900X has a convincing lead. It's running at nearly 750 FPS, compared to the paltry 686 FPS for the 7600X. Obviously, both of these figures are more than enough. Hell, even ASUS's new 540Hz 1080p panel would be fine with either of these CPUs here, so it's not exactly a win for the 12-core. At 4K, the difference is pretty similar, if a little closer, with the 7900X only being 6.5% faster on average, instead of 8.6% at 1440p. In Cyberpunk, at 1440p, you'll actually find the 7600X about 5% ahead of the 7900X on average, with just over 200 FPS, or about 10 FPS faster. Well, that doesn't seem to make sense. If you look at the 1% and 0.1% low figures, you'll see that the 7900X is considerably better there. It's 22% faster in the 0.1% lows, meaning while the overall average ended up being slightly lower, the consistency was much better. That pattern is the same at 4K, although both stats are functionally identical, as 4K ends up being more GPU bound anyway, even with a 4090. Shadow of the Tomb Raider has a slim victory for the 7900X, but not a noticeable one. The 12-core nets 277 FPS average, whereas the 6-core nets 261 FPS instead. That's hardly a big difference, only 6%, and more importantly, at 1440p, it's not a difference you'd exactly be feeling in-game. For £220, I would say that that's a negligible gap. The 1% and 0.1% low figures are a little bigger of a margin at 20% and 17% respectively, but 130 FPS for the 0.1% lows, it's hard to argue that isn't a smooth gaming experience on either chip. At 4K, once again the differences get quashed. There's just a 3.7% gap on average here, although very similar 1% and 0.1% low results to the 1440p numbers. Microsoft Flight is again remarkably close. At 1440p on high settings, there's only a 6% or 8 FPS gap between the two chips, and the 1% lows are similarly close. As you might expect at 4K, it's even tighter with just a 3 FPS gap between the two chips on average, although the 7900X does still hold better 1% low figures. Surprisingly, at both 1440p and at 4K, the 7600X is actually the one with the higher 0.1% low results, and it's not by much at just 2 FPS each time, but that's still quite interesting. And finally, in Fortnite, the gap between the two chips is just 3%, or 5 FPS on average. It's 7 FPS on the 1% lows and around 5 FPS on the 0.1% lows. I would call that close enough to identical, especially once you start actually playing a full game, as your performance will vary depending on what you're doing and where you're doing it. The same can be said at 4K. A 3% gap, or just 4 FPS on average. So what's the conclusion here? Well, in short, if you happen to own a ridiculous card like an RTX 4090, you'll be happy to know that pairing it with a CPU that costs about as much as a rounding error on this card does isn't the worst idea. In fact, it's perfectly capable. Sure, if you've got the money to splash out on a 4090, you probably have the cash for a 17900X or Intel's new 13900KS, if you want your house to go up in flames along with the power connector, but if your priorities are such that a 7600X is all you've got, well, you can rest easy knowing it's giving you 95% or more of the performance from your utterly insane GPU. For the rest of us that can't afford a 4090 though, the takeaway here is that your CPU matters a whole lot less for your gaming performance than you might expect. A mid-tier 6-core is more than enough for even a 4090, so you really don't need a 16-core chip just to get the most out of your mid-tier graphics card. If all you're doing is gaming on your system, then picking a lower-end CPU and spending your extra cash that you saved on a higher-end chip on a higher-end GPU will give you a much better gaming experience overall. So that's probably my advice there for us normies. Now, if you are interested in the 4090 or either of these CPUs, I'll leave some global Amazon affiliate links in the description to them if you are interested and if you can afford them. And otherwise, that's kind of it. If you want to see more videos like this one, hit the subscribe button, turn the bell notification icon. You can also support the channel through YouTube itself, through Patreon, and the link in the description, or hoodies or t-shirts like this one, or a load of other designs that I made myself. There's also a load of other stuff in the description, a load of other affiliate links that don't cost you anything to use, but do help me out when you use them. And you can also check out plenty of other videos on the end cards as well. If you want to see me do more stuff with this 4090, as I still have it for a little while yet, feel free to let me know what I should do with it in the comments down below, and with these CPUs as well. And otherwise, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, we'll see you all in the next video.